Well, all right, guys, welcome back to what will be our last week of lectures and our final test number 3 being this week. Um, again, just kind of a little bit of wrap up, a little bit of housekeeping, if you will. I know there are 3 assignments out there that need to be graded. They will be graded by Wednesday. Everything will be done and in. Your test, obviously, open up, I believe it is Wednesday. This is test 3, the last of the 3. So, again, best of luck on that. We're going to talk about chapters 17 and 18, but before I get into that, once again, you guys, if you need anything from me from a standpoint of contacts within industry, if you guys are looking for internships, if those of you who are seniors, if you're looking for employment, please do not be afraid to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to use my contacts in the industry to hopefully get you in front of the right people. So keep that in mind, guys. All right, here we go. So, chapter 17, exhibit and trade shows. So we're talking, and we touched a little bit on this last week actually, about the scope of some of these trade shows and exhibits and how large they are. And again, this chapter really goes into detail from more the exhibit standpoint. We touched on a little bit last week when we talked about how, again, there was a Marriott exhibit I once saw that was 3 stories tall. There was a Delta or United Airlines that brought part of a plane. So again, you've got some of the extremes, but you've also got what your typical exhibit areas are. And the book's going to go into greater detail about this, but when you talk about exhibits, usually you're talking about either tabletop exhibits, booth exhibits, area exhibits. Okay, and obviously tabletop is very self-explanatory. It's a 6-foot table. You're behind it. Again, think your career fairs. A lot of times, just have those kind of tables and everyone's lined up around said room. An area exhibits, you're probably going to have more of a specific floor space for exhibits. You might have large and tall equipment, kind of like we talked about with the Marriott and and like I said, United. Then you can have booth exhibits, and that's usually what you see, and they're pipe and draped off, and they can be 10 by 10, they can be 8 by 8, they can be 8 by 10. The size can vary. And again, when you go to these trade shows, you're going to have premier spaces and then your typical spaces. And the book talks about your standard, your perimeter, your peninsula, your island. Be familiar with those. Each one of those are going to have its own price level, and there are going to be advantages to having each one. So again, you as an exhibitor, if that's what you go into, are going to need to know what those advantages are. You as the convention side need to know how you value each one so you sell it at the appropriate rate. So we talk about trade shows and managing exhibit personnel, and again, we touched on this a little bit last week. You've got your contractors. You may have union to deal with. Again, guys, think of trade shows as, and like I said, we did touch on this a little bit last week. There is so much that goes into these things, and I'm just going to read you real quick. I'm going to read you from the outline, just to give you an idea of some of the positions that can pop up during a trade show that you may have to use yourself, or you may have to provide to the people who are exhibiting at your convention. You've got labor, tear down, setup. You've got plumbing, electrical, signage, cleaning, telephones, florists. Again, booth personnel. Are we going to bring somebody in who's a model, who is an expert in a certain area? They're going to actually kind of be in that person's booth. A translator, if you will. Audiovisual. Again, floor plans for approval by the fire marshal. There's just so much that goes into these trade shows, and they are massive in a lot of cases. But you do also have your smaller ones that can be a one hotel piece of business. So again, the scale of these goes from a 4,400 square foot ballroom to 1,000,000 square feet. And obviously there's a lot of differences that goes into each one. So, as we go through some things that you as the running the exhibit show are going to want to make sure that you have in your arsenal of information to then sell to the exhibitors. We talk about drawings to scales, outlines, diagrams, layouts. Your photo file is going to be immense for an exhibit because you're going to be able to show different things that can be provided. And whether that is how the booths are laid out, how the trade show itself is laid out, what's the flow, where's the drawing power of the trade show. In other words, if you as the provider of the convention, or even you as the one selling the convention center space, if you know that the people who are running it are going to have entertainment here and food here and raffles here, you want to make sure you lay that out in your scale drawing because that's going to affect the people who are buying the booths. Obviously, you would imagine that the person putting on the convention, not just the convention center, but say I'm the association and I'm putting this convention center or the convention on, I'm going to have that laid out as well. But the convention has to know about it because, of course, where they drop different power and supplies and those kind of things. But then the booth buyer also has to have a knowledge of this so they can figure out whether or not, hey, do I want to be right next to the food? Is that a drawing power? Would I rather be over here next to maybe a partner booth? It could be that I'm going in as the Crown Plaza and Visit Indy is going to go in as well. I probably want to be near them because our wants and needs are going to cross over each other. So it makes sense to be in similar proximity to each other. So all that comes into play. Again, when you look at setting up the booths, you have so many things you have to look at, from the timetable that you have from setup to show to tear down, what the show hours are, when do you have security in, when you don't have security in. Again, do you have labor regulations that say you can only put up and tear down over certain hours and it has to be done by labor personnel? And all of this you have to look at before you begin to plan these shows. And again, one of the last things that the book talks about a little bit is insurance. Exhibitors should be required to carry exhibiting insurance and sign a hold harmless agreement. Hence, I take the responsibility for my booth. I'm going to manage my booth. I'm going to secure my booth. And if something were to happen to the things that I bring into it, I hold the convention center harmless. That's on me. And that's not unheard of to sign those. So, again, we've had the exhibit now, set up, tear down, everything's going on. We're talking about the billing process. And again, guys, you should see what these bills look like for putting on a convention in the booth and what goes into it. And I cannot imagine, again, because I'm on the hotel side, I'm on the sales side, I'm not on the implementation side very often, but to be put in charge of a convention center where you're going to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of square feet, and then having to do the billing for these massive, massive exhibits and conventions, it would be, you're going to need an army. You're going to need a number of people, everybody from those who understand what was used and what it is to being lay out the bill, to the accounting office, obviously, to make sure that everything is coded correctly. And all of this needs to be gone over with the vendor running the booth. Make sure that they're aware of all the charges that go in there. Now, on a smaller scale, hotels do the same thing. If we had a convention at my hotel, which we can do, we can almost do 110 8x8 booths in our grand hall ballroom in our conference center. So we do a lot of smaller conventions, but it's very much the same thing on a smaller scale. Those bills will be laid out where it'll say, this is what your booth cost, this was the power drop, this is what it was called, the cost was for any audiovisual that you got from us. You had additional water or snacks at your booth that you got from us. That's billed here as well. There was labor to tear down and set up your booth. Here's that bill. The transportation of any product you had shipped to the hotel, if there's a cost for that, that's laid in there as well. So again, all of that gets laid out, and then because the vendors are being billed independently, not the person putting on the convention, it may go that route. Now, some hotels may say, you know what, we're hands-free on this. For anything that we can't provide, in other words, a lot of times for your larger conventions, they'll have the pipe and drape. Well, in my hotel, we actually asked if the client goes out and gets a third party who does exhibit setup. A George Fern is an example of a company that does that. And so all that billing goes through them. Now, the power still comes from us. AV could still come from us. Or the person putting on the convention could have their own AV company. We don't have an exclusive at my hotel, so they could go that route. So again, that billing could come from actually 2 or 3 different people as well. So again, from the hotel side, you need to make sure that everything is laid out. You never want to blindside a vendor. Or any client for that matter on costs. They want to make sure all that's done up front and there's an awareness. Again, there's so many things. We talk about addressing technology, and that's going to change, so fast and so quick. But we've kind of touched on this in the AV chapters, and it's no different when you're talking about exhibits. When you are presenting them with options, you are laying out all the technical advantages that you have that you can provide and that would fit well within the convention or the exhibit that they're putting on. So again, you're going to go into great details there. Again, shipping and receiving, so much of that depends upon the hotel. We will take shipments up to so many pounds for free. Anything over a certain poundage, anything that's on a skid, anything that has to be taken from the back docks to your location by a jack, if you will, then there's a charge for that. So all of that's going to get laid out. Again, all of that needs to be addressed up front with the client, whether that is the one putting on the exhibit or whether that is your information that's going to go to the vendor themselves, because we're going to we're going to bill them directly. You can go both ways. There are some conventions where everything is billed through the person putting on the convention, and then we send them a final bill. They'll break out that bill to say, okay, you owe this and you owe that, and this booth owes this and this booth owes that. So it just depends on how it's being done. When you talk about the exhibit process and who oversees all this, it's there's a lot of hands involved, and it goes back again to a common theme we've had all year about communication. And whether you're a convention center or whether or not you're a hotel, you're going to have again an army of people who are going to have a hands-on in this. And again, how you communicate to everybody is key. From an exhibiting process, when you look at the overview, say, of a convention center, okay, typically you have a director of exhibit services, association executive, or a show manager. You might have an exhibit supervisor, decorator, and exhibit services contractor, as well as a convention services manager, okay? And all of those people are going to interact with one another. A lot of the responsibilities are going to cross over. They're going to have talks with one another. And again, all of it has to get back to the person who is presenting the exhibit. Again, the vendor who's running the booth, if you will. Now, from a hotel standpoint, a lot of that's going to fall on our client services manager, and they kind of become a jack of all trades, if you will. Your larger hotels may have a separate staff for exhibits and conventions like that. I think back to somebody like a Mandalay Bay in Vegas who has 1 million square feet of meeting space. They're putting on these rather large and cumbersome conventions. They most likely would have their own staff that strictly deals with that. So again, you're looking at a lot of different people on here, and it really, for you guys, it just means there are more opportunities out there for you to be involved in the industry. I mean, again, if you find yourself someone who is drawn to the decor, drawn to the presentation of, say, a vendor's booth, then maybe that's something that you go into and you become an asset to, obviously, those conventions and how they set their booths up. Again, logistics. If you like logistics, well, obviously running the floor of a convention where there's 1,000 booths, there's a lot of logistics that goes into that. Maybe that's something more up your alley. So again, these are all opportunities, guys, for you to use the skills that you're picking up right now here at IUPUI and where you can take them from there. So again, as far as a step-by-step process of how everything kind of works out, the book gives you 5 steps, basically. So association contracts with a hotel for exhibit space or convention center. That's kind of the start of the whole thing. Then the association is going to solicit exhibitors and contractors for the booth space. In other words, we have the space. Now, I, as an association, to find people or companies who want to present their product to my association members. And again, I'll give you an example. When I go to MPI, which is Meeting Professionals International, the people who want to present are like me. You have 3,000 planners who are coming to this conference, and there's an exhibit element to it. Well, yeah, you're going to have hotels. You're going to have visiting bureaus, again, like a Visit Indy. You're going to have restaurants, and you think gigantic chains, again, like the Hard Rocks of the world, like Ruth Chris of the world, because they're looking at it from a global standpoint, if you will. So those are the kind of vendors you're seeing in our industry when we go to these kind of conventions. And so that's who MPI then is going after to actually sell the booths to, okay? Now, the association then will contract with a decorator, basically, to see, okay, what do we want to offer? You can offer foliage, plants, and that kind of fun stuff. You can offer furniture. You can offer AV. All of that will be arranged by the association and presented to us, the vendors, whether or not we want that in our booths or not. And again, typically, when you have the decorator on board, they're going to have a services kit, if you will. In other words, here are all the things that you could have in your booth that we're going to provide. Check off the ones you want. It'll have the prices on there. Because again, I might want a TV, a DVD player, internet access, and power. But I don't need water. I don't need foliage. I don't need a translator. And they may have all that listed out. I'm only going to check off the things that I want. And again, everything's billed back directly to me. So, and then obviously the last step is once everybody knows what they want, then the booths are assigned and the floor plan is laid out. And the reason you're usually going to wait to do that is that you're going to make booths most likely that are using similar services probably close to one another. Again, if these 4 booths don't need power, I'm not going to put them right next to booths that do, because I've got power drops in certain areas. So it makes sense to kind of put people where they can all use the same services, and it's easy for the convention center to lay out. Now, you also might not want competitors next to each other. I may not have the Marriott booth right next to the Hilton booth, right next to the Crowne Plaza booth. We might want to spread those guys out. It makes it a little bit easier on everybody. Again, we're all there for the same purpose, but having us right next to each other really probably isn't the best idea. Same way with food. I wouldn't have Ruth Chris right next to St. Elmo's, right next to Morton Steakhouse. We're going to spread those guys out. So that's chapter 17 in a nutshell. Give me just a second, guys, while I switch over here to chapter 18. All right. So chapter 18 talks a little bit about convention billing and post-convention review. So one of the things, and we've talked about this a little bit with meetings, what are some of the questions you're going to ask when a convention decides to go definite? In other words, yep, we're holding our convention with you. What are the things we need to know? Well, again, a convention is a huge animal, so we want to drill down a little bit on some very important, issues with this convention. So number one, what area does the master account cover? Obviously, not everything can go on the master account. Okay, what does? Who are the individuals charged to handle things? Is there more than one master account? Are there 2 or 3 different entities helping put this on, or is it all under one name, if you will? Who's authorized to put charges on the master account? That's huge, because problems can arise all the time when a guest goes, oh, no, I'm on the master account, or the company's paying for me, you don't need a credit card from me, they're covering all my costs. Well, I need to have one person I can go to that says, hey, Bill Smith over here says that you're covering his costs. Is that true or not? Because we didn't have him on our original master. Okay, so those kind of things become very, very important when it comes to the billing and how we're going to arrange everything. Again, some of it is going to be very common space. Gratuities, food and beverage, is that part of the master? Is the audiovisual part of the master? Again, we talked about in a convention setting, is one person paying for everything, or each individual booth going to pay for their own audiovisual? Do you need the billing broke down? Some just need, hey, here's the final cost. Some need it itemized. Are the deposits required? Again, the book does a good job of hitting all of these. I'm just kind of giving you a quick overview. Any special charges, transportation, when it comes to deliveries, how do we charge for those? All of that needs to be laid out, and then it obviously has to be discussed on who's paying for what. Are the individual vendors who are setting up the exhibits paying for these things, or is this part of the convention overall cost? Okay, so again, the book goes into some great detail as far as time of payment, and this is going to vary on the policy of the hotel. Typically, a lot of times you're going to ask for a deposit down that obviously guarantees that the group is not going to up and leave. They're invested, obviously. It could be a timing where we say, okay, within 30 days, we need to have 30% within 60 days, another 40%, and then 30% again. We can arrange it however we want as long as the client agrees to it. So, in my world, in the Crowne Plaza world, our Crowne meetings directors, we will present the bill per day and an overall bill before they actually leave the hotel. Now, there are some things that are based on consumption that may come a day or so later, but for the most part, 95% of that bill, they're going to know before they walk out the door. Again, and that's up to them. We do a daily meetings debrief is what we call it. So every day when a meeting is done, the Crowne meetings director will sit down with the client and say, here's today's cost. Does this all look correct? Because that's the best time to say, oh, hey, no, we didn't get that, or oh, hey, you forgot about this, or this or that, because it's fresh in everybody's mind. And then obviously before they walk out the door, they're going to get their last set of, the final bill saying this is everything we've discussed the last 3 or 4 days put in one document. Okay? So not everybody does that, but that is the way that we do ours. So again, it's going to depend upon what is the policies of the individual hotels. Now, you also, and again, we talk about conventions. You're going to have guest room stays as well as the convention the convention setup and booths and food and beverage. So again, all of this is going into a final billing. If the association, let's say, is covering certain convention costs, but one of them is not rooms, okay, how do we handle that? Okay, well then every individual is going to pay for their own, and they're going to put a credit card down, and that's how we're going to secure their room. again, it might be that you have various sub-entities, and this gets really confusing. And I apologize, guys. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, and this is a very difficult topic to tackle. But an association brings in a convention, and it's 3 days long, and it has an education track to it. But they also have different vendors who obviously their clients are members of the association. So again, perfect example, MPI. We go out to Las Vegas, and I have my booth set up, but on top of that, I want to entertain potential clients. So now I might get with the hotel and say, I need a ballroom, and I need your catering, and I need AV, and I'm gonna need to get entertainment, and you're gonna bill me directly. So it falls under the convention per se, but the convention has nothing to do with it. It's coming to me, the vendor. So again, we go back to billing and how is that all arranged? And that's where we can get very convoluted, and it does take a very strong accounting department to make sure all of this stuff, works smoothly, and again, everybody gets billed correctly, because we are in the industry of making revenue, and you don't want to lose out on getting your revenue. So when all is said and done, okay, everything's done, billing's done, clients left, we've cleaned up, and we're moving on to the next client. What we'd like to do is a post-convention review, okay? And you can do this as a post-meeting review as well. And there's really two great ways of doing this. Number one, you'd want to review with the client. Hey, where did we do well? Where did we drop the ball? What are your attendees saying about the event? Where were the pluses? Where were the minuses? Did they love this? Did they not love that? And that's feedback for us so that we can get better for the next convention. Okay? So we want to know the good things we did, but we also want to know where we fell a little bit short, because obviously we know we're not perfect. There are going to be moments when something happens that maybe was out of our control. Maybe it was a miscommunication between us and the client. We want to address it right away, and then obviously come with the solutions so it doesn't happen again, because obviously we love to get return business. You also will have a post-convention review of your staff only, okay? What did we see? Was our communication strong? Was anybody caught off guard by anything? Hey, this party really got out of hand kind of quickly. We might want to think twice about how we staff this from a security standpoint. Or maybe the bars shouldn't stay open 4 hours, they should only stay open 3. We found that they weren't eating a lot of the desserts we laid out, so all the food went to waste. Maybe that's something next time with the client we say, hey, you know what, you won't need that kind of food. Again, all the different review things. Hey, their VIPs were fantastic. They treated our rooms very nicely. They were very friendly. Or our staff got totally abused by this group. We need to come up with a way to address that with the client if we want to have them here again. So again, all this feedback goes into, how we did, how we could do better, how we did great. And a lot of that comes back then to me, the sales manager, to say, hey, Jay, this group you just had in, here are the things that we heard that we did well. Okay, fantastic. That's good for me to know, because I'm going to have that discussion with the client most likely. Here are things that we dropped the ball on. Let me tell you why. Because it's probably going to be me that's going to try to sell them on coming back again, and I've got to have the solution to whatever the problem is. And my staff's going to say, hey, by the way, here are some things about this group that we absolutely loved, and here are some things about this group that concern us. And again, we may sit down as a hotel, and I have actually had this happen where a group was just, they were so abusive to our staff and to the property in general that we didn't want them back. It didn't make, the revenue that was gained did not outweigh either the expenses we incurred or the stress to our staff. It's a rarity. It's a rarity that something like that happens, but it does happen. And again, maybe I need to address the client and say, hey, here's what we saw. Can you help us so that doesn't happen again? That either our staff is getting put in a situation they shouldn't be in, or there needs to be some discussion of expectations maybe on your attendees' part. But anyway, we need to come together and address it. So the post-convention reviews are huge for us to sit back and say, where can we get better? Where are our weaknesses? How do we strengthen them? Where are our strengths? How do we highlight those? Because if this client liked it, most likely 3 or 4 other clients are also going to appreciate that. How do we get that word out? So again, those are all, so important to, in my world, the sales process, because I'm usually the one that's going to be in front of the client, either apologizing for something that went wrong or highlighting the successes that we had. So, guys, that wraps up Chapter 18, and pretty much that wraps up this semester. So again, thank you so much for taking the class. I appreciate all of you. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I would love to hear from all of you. If there are things you need help with, if there are contacts that can be made, if there's anything you want to review real fast before the 3rd test, Again, my office number you have my cell phone number, you have my email. Best of luck with everything. Again, a privilege to be your guys' professor this semester, and I wish you all nothing but the best of luck.